It was an insurrection incited by the President of the United States. Those who choose to continue to support is a dangerous gambit by objecting to the results of a legitimate democratic election will forever be seen as being complicit in an unprecedented attack against our democracy.
I know your pain. I know you're hurt. We had an election that was stolen from us. It was a landslide election, and everyone knows it, especially the other side. But you have to go home now. We have to have peace. We have to have law and order. We have to respect our great people in law and order. We don't want anybody hurt. It's a very tough period of time. There's never been a time like this where such a thing happened, where they could take it away from all of us, from me, from you, from our country. This was a fraudulent election, but we can't play into the hands of these people. We have to have peace. So go home. We love you. You're very special. You've seen what happens. You see the way others are treated that are so bad and so evil. I know how you feel. But go home and go home in peace.
Again, back to 1814, the last time we saw the Capitol breach like that. I think this is a culmination. This is a culmination of 4 years of them denying the president won the election, claiming the Russians flipped votes. This is 4 years of investigation, and there was 4 years now of a very frustrated electorate, 75 million that voted and feel they haven't had their day in court, let alone lost in court. And that's what happened. My thought is overall, Martha, is that they say in rehab, and I know so many people that have gone through it, things have to hit rock bottom before you get better. We have hit rock bottom, I hope. And now maybe people say enough of the rhetoric and trying to score points, and now it's time to dial it back, Republicans and Democrats, and do this thing called cooperation, make deals, and get something done.
Just a minute left.
What is wrong with you? I also want to know, are we a nation of laws? Are we a nation of one man? Donald J. Trump called for the insurrection against the United States of America. He called for it. Rudy Giuliani called for combat justice just an hour or two before this happened. Donald Trump Jr. said, "We are coming for you." That's insurrection against the United States of America. And if Donald Trump Jr., Rudy Giuliani, and Donald Trump are not arrested today for insurrection and taken to jail and booked, and if the Capitol Hill police do not go through every video and look at the face of every person that invaded our Capitol, and if they are not arrested and brought to justice today, then we are no longer a nation of laws.
The purpose of the joint session having concluded, pursuant to Senate Concurrent Resolution 1, 117th Congress, the chair declares the joint session dissolved.
Welcome to the War Room. It is live from the nation's capital. You are in the War Room. It is Thursday, the 7th of January, the year of our Lord 2021, now with over 27 million downloads on our podcast. And, of course, John Fredericks Radio Network, Real America's Voice, G News, GTV, in Mandarin, and throughout the world on Rumble, Facebook, YouTube, all of it. I guess not on Facebook. Keep forgetting who's taking us down. I want to announce that the live stream chat, the comment section is back up. Want everybody in there, the posse talking about FogCityMidge. Maggie Vandenberg is here in the War Room, co-host today. We got Jack Maxey. We have from Arizona, from the representative from Southern Arizona, Oro Valley, Mark Finchem, and we have Jack Posobiec on the horn. I want to go back, and we've got a lot to get through today. And in fact, I'll start with Posobiec, but I want to go around the horn. Is Jack Posobiec there? Jack Posobiec's not there? Okay, thanks. We're going to get Jack Posobiec here in a second. You guys were at Maggie. I want to get to this thing about inciting this. We're not defending. What I want to do is put out the facts. Are people that were there? Representative Finchem was there. You were there. You guys were both there for the speech at the Ellipse, Presidential Park, and then went up to the Capitol. So let me start with Finchem first. Was this a rally speech? Because you've been to a lot of rallies, you've seen Trump a lot. Was this a rally speech, or was it something else? Was it more of a briefing, or was it a rally speech?
Great question. It was a briefing speech. It was one where the president laid out, state by state, here are the reasons that we believe that this is a fraudulent election. And, went from Arizona, Pennsylvania, Georgia, just through the whole thing and said, these are the things that, had we been in court, we would have been able to prove. These are the things that, had we had forensic auditing done, we would be able to show even greater evidence than we've already turned in. So to me, as an experienced investigator, it was the laying out of a case, and here are the proofs. That's simple.
You have been both at Arizona for the 11. You were the guy that initiated to help get the 11-hour hearing out there, and you were the guy that actually helped coordinate over the weekend. There was a huge conference with 350 state legislators from around the nation, and then I think 160 signed some sort of joint resolution. So you're familiar not just with the Arizona material of the different verticals. You're also, whether that vertical is voter fraud, or whether that is ballot fraud, or whether it's election fraud, alleged, or even the Dominion machines and all that. You're also fairly familiar, because you sat through the briefings of Navarro and Rudy over the weekend for the state legislatures, and you helped coordinate this letter. So given your knowledge of Arizona, was the president's his talk, was it pretty thorough?
I think it was very thorough.
How so?
He laid out not just one kind of alleged fraud, but he was able to connect the dots, if you will, between Senator Mastriano in Pennsylvania, Senator Ligon in Georgia. And I think that he even went as far as to, in connecting those dots, suggested that, even if it was an intimation, suggested that, look, you've got the same thing in different varieties, but you've got fraud vectors that are all that you don't have coincidences like this.
Right.
Particularly when you're engaged in fraud. Usually it's going to be this kind or that kind, but when you've got a palette that matches from state to state to state, now we're looking at something. If I were the investigator looking at, I would say we are now looking at something that was very well coordinated.
I want to, but just for YouTube and Twitter, all the guys out there that are going to be looking at this, the left media, I'm getting to a point here, and one of the points is about existing litigation that is continuing. We're going to get back to Arizona litigation. We're going to talk about Georgia litigation. These are things that are in either state courts or federal courts. My point, I'm going to bring Posobiec in a second for this. It was a fairly, if you're familiar with Trump world and familiar with rallies, and particularly the million people that showed up, I don't think many of them were there for the first time. Just a thing, right? It's 37 degrees, wind blowing. It was a little dry, would you not say?
It was dry.
Because he's making a case. Maggie, you're my daughter, Captain Bannon, you said, hey, who are big Trump fans, this was not a
great speech for the crowd, right? It was not the speech people wanted to hear because it was low energy. It was freezing cold.
Was it low energy or focused energy?
I felt it was defeatist energy, and many of the people that I spoke to felt like there was kind of this. The tone felt off. It didn't feel like a winning speech.
Were people at the end of it were people jacked up like we often see people jacked up at Trump rallies?
No.
Not at all.
And if anything, as Maureen and I were saying yesterday, there were a lot of people who were walking out who were leaving the speech early. And as I was speaking to some of the VIPs who were on the way out, I said, "Oh, where are you headed?" And they're like, "I'm so cold. I just got to go." Like I know the fraud. I understand what happened. He's outlining it. We've heard this. He's got my support, but I just can't stand here.
And keep in mind, there were people that were collecting there at 5:45 in the morning.
No.
So
you
they
guys
were
got
there a long
No,
time.
people were there. No,
they were tired.
No warmth, and it was cold. Okay, I want to bring in Jack Posobiec from One America News Jack, I want to talk about the president's speech because then we're going to talk about going up to Capitol Hill. In your assessment of the speech, as a news guy and a guy that's been covering this from the beginning, had been to so many rallies over the years, did you remember, and if you did, let's just get on the table, anything in that speech that you felt was inciting people to take action or inciting people to go up to the Capitol, storm the Capitol, confront people, anything? Any quotes you remember, any of that?
Look, Steve, we've heard the president give speeches so many times, many rallies that I've covered all across the country. The president has never called for violence. Any of those in this speech was exactly the same as that. He certainly didn't call for violence. He certainly didn't incite anyone to confront people. You can contrast that with the rhetoric of people on the political left who have called, like Maxine Waters, AOC, who have called for these types of protests. The president didn't have any kind of inciting language whatsoever. He was making a legal case. He was talking about voter irregularities. He was echoing many of the same, statements that have been made here day in, day out on war and pandemic, talking about all of this and what's going on. That was the meat and potatoes of the speech that we heard. There wasn't anything in there that you could even construe as inciting violence, unless, of course, you were going to create some kind of pseudo-reality, as James Lindsay calls it, and try to extrapolate things 10 times away and twist words out of their actual meanings.
So Mark Finchem and Maggie, I want to come back to you guys, given Jack laid that out. Given the timing of the speech, and the president, for being president of the United States, always runs a little bit on the late side. He was late for this one. The speech was supposed to be, I think, characterized because of the detailed nature of it, laying out almost like a preamble to the case that then at 1 o'clock was going to shift to the action on Capitol Hill with Vice President Pence. Now, clearly, because he was late and he also wings it, right? He goes off script. It ran longer. But when he said, the part of the speech where people criticize and says, hey, we're all going to march up to Capitol Hill. I'm going to lead you. Do you remember that?
Yeah, well, he didn't really come out and say, like, hey, everybody go up to Capitol Hill. The way he sort of ended was, and now I understand some of you are going to march up to Capitol Hill. It was not like a command. It wasn't telling people what to do. It was just sort of like, I think some of you are going to head up there, Yeah,
and I think the timing, we have to remember the timing of that is, look, he's laying out the case as Congress is beginning to open these envelopes. That's a crucial thing to remember. He wanted the people to know this is what the congressmen are going to be seeing. This is what they're going to be hearing from Arizona. And I think that's probably why it was this low energy kind of feeling. He was being factual. He was not being energetic to try and get people, hey, you've got to go up to the Capitol and you got to be couldn't have been any more different than that.
You're saying he's making the thing that I'm giving you the facts of this, and later they're going to be opening up these electors. Here is the facts as I'm laying out about those electors.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and then we're going to I'll tell you what, let's take a short commercial break. We'll have another cold open. We got Jack Posobiec from One America News. Jack's got some analysis of the Antifa element of this and how that's going to be proven, right? Joe Scarborough asked for the FBI and law enforcement to get every picture. We totally agree with that. If you're going to get pictures, get every picture and see who the perpetrators of this are. And I think a lot of people in the MAGA movement say there were a lot of Antifa people there, but the evidence will show it. Okay, take a short commercial break. Mark Finchem from Arizona, Maggie Vandenberg, and Jack Posobiec with Jack Maxey. I'll return in a second.
We rejoice when there's no more. Let's take down the CCP. They have all lied for too long.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
You have some senators who, for political advantage, were giving false hope to their supporters, misleading them into thinking that somehow yesterday's actions in Congress could reverse the results of the election, or even get some kind of emergency audit of the election results. That was never going to happen, yet these senators, as insurrectionists, literally stormed the Capitol, were sending out fundraising emails. That shouldn't have happened, and it's got to stop now.
When it comes to accountability, the president needs to understand that his actions were the problem, not the solution. That the rally yesterday was unseemly, It got out of hand, and a good friend of mine, Rudy Giuliani, did not help.
I think there's no question that America would be better off if the president would resign or be removed from office, and if Mike Pence, the Vice President of the United States, would conduct a peaceful transition of power over the next 13 days until President Biden is sworn in.
They weren't protesters. Don't dare call them protesters. They were a riotous mob, insurrectionists, domestic terrorists. It's that basic, it's that simple. And I wish we could say we couldn't see it coming. But that isn't true. We could see it coming. The past 4 years, we've had a president who's made his contempt for our democracy, our Constitution, the rule of law clear in everything he has done. He unleashed an all-out assault on our institutions of our democracy from the outset. And yesterday was but the culmination of that unrelenting attack.
Because yesterday, the President of the United States incited an armed insurrection against America. The gleeful desecration of the U.S. Capitol, which is the temple of our American democracy, and the violence targeting Congress are horrors that will forever stain our nation's history, instigated by the President of the United States. That's why it's such a stain. In calling for this seditious act, the President has committed an unspeakable assault on our nation and our people. I join the Senate Democratic leader in calling on the Vice President to remove this President by immediately invoking the 25th Amendment. If the Vice President and the Cabinet do not act, the Congress may be prepared to move forward with impeachment. That is the overwhelming sentiment of my caucus.
Okay, firestorm today, all day. You've heard it laid out there. They're talking about the 25th Amendment. They're talking about, if not, they're going to impeach the President of the United States. Insurrection, armed mob, on and on and on. A lot of words I didn't hear about Portland or Chicago or, in June here when this city was paralyzed for many, many, many weeks. But I want to get back to the facts. What we try to do here in the war room, we're trying to lay it out. So we have people that were there. The Pence's tweet of his statement came exactly at 1 o'clock. The president had not finished his speech, though. His laying out the case, which he wanted to back up right to that moment, obviously went on. He was still speaking. What was any reaction in the crowd?
Yes. As soon as we saw it, people were just pulling it up and shaking their heads. They were pissed. And people started even in the VIP section to say, did you see this? Did you see? And people were like kind of yelling amongst one another, like, are you seeing this, what Pence did? And they're speaking. I mean, during the president's speech, people were they had completely tuned out and they were talking about what Pence had done.
I've seen grass fires move slower.
Okay, so in other words, that caught fire. And by that time, everybody, the people from the Washington Monument, everybody was always, then shortly thereafter, everybody started moving. The rest of the crowd started moving up to Capitol Hill.
Yeah, by the time, when the speech was done, I turned around and started walking out from the front of the stage. There was a steady drain of people, and I mean, it was thick, probably 25 people wide, coming out of the Washington Monument area, headed towards Pennsylvania Avenue. I would say 3/4 of a mile of people thick.
That was a massive crowd. Jack Maxey.
To me, it was clearly a sort of hit job. Remember, it came out at exactly 1:02 p.m. By that time, Pence was already up at the podium or in the room. He wasn't playing with his phone at that point, so somebody in his staff was teed off to tee it at that exact moment.
Well, I don't know if it's a hit job because he was at 1 o'clock. He's supposed to stand up, and that was what he was going to say. He essentially read what they wanted to do is get it out to the world at the very moment he came out and did it. I don't think it's a hit job. The reason you might say that is because the president went 10 minutes longer in his speech. So before he had a chance to culminate his speech, why would you think it's a hit job?
Well, number one, I think the president, the consensus, at least amongst our live stream viewers and many of the people I think who are feeling a bit heartbroken today, is that Trump knew beforehand that Pence was not going to stand up. So just like he's done so many times before, he came out, he did his duty, he promised to be there for his supporters. He went out, he laid out his case, but he already knew That the betrayal was on the books.
I got that, but you said this hitting of it was a hit job. The sending it out was a hit job. Why do you think that?
Because Pence could have just gone up there and done this. He didn't need to write an explanatory letter, and then all of this would have been revealed by the facts and the actions of this person.
I think what
who
they're
is fulfilling a solely
I'm
ceremonial.
not defending Mike Pence because I totally disagree with Mike Pence did. However, I think they're trying to get that out for capital markets. It was the most important event out there. Of course, everybody had heard the rumors up until, leading and the low energy, et cetera. I want to go to Jack Posobiec of One American News. Jack Posobiec, you had actually left earlier, I believe you told me, after the Don Jr. speech. By the way, Joe Scarborough wants to arrest and book Don Jr. You heard the speech. Posobiec, you're a naval intelligence officer specialist in the CCP because you speak Mandarin. You heard the speech of Don Jr. Was there anything in the Don Jr. speech you thought was inciting a riot or inciting any kind of activity to storm the Capitol?
No, none whatsoever. Don Jr. was calling for a fulfillment of the constitutional process put forward by the Founding Fathers, a process that's been used multiple times during contested elections. There was no incitement to violence whatsoever from either in the president's speech, which I was able to listen to remotely, or Don Jr.'s speech or Eric's speech, or frankly any speech that was up there that day.
You were at there, Maggie and Representative Finchem are walking up in that crowd, probably towards the two-thirds of the tail end of the crowd since they left later at the end of the speech. You're up there on Capitol Hill when it first starts coming up. What was, and today, I just want to make sure our audience understands this, in this firestorm about the president for the 25th Amendment and impeachment, actually the Senate Minority Leader, Schumer's already called for, Jack, the firing of the Sergeant at Arms. Nancy Pelosi, I think, has called for the firing. She's trying to track down the Capitol Police. Every official associated with the protection of the Capitol yesterday, it's not Steve Bannon and guys saying, hey, it looked a little thin to us, given what normally they do in the Capitol for like the State of the Union. When you're in full lockdown, the barrier's up, everybody's around, you got helicopters, wire, you got to go through the Hart Building. I mean, the thing's in total lockdown. It looked a little thin with bike racks or whatever. We're not calling for it, although we've mentioned, hey, we want to show some video. It doesn't look exactly like that, a big crew. It's Schumer and Pelosi are calling for their termination. Am I not correct? So Posobiec, when you're up there, I mean, you're a military guy. What does it look like when the crowd starts coming up? Is it look like a group that's going to storm the Capitol, or put us on the plaza?
Right. So as we're walking up, I was sort of bouncing between being on Capitol Hill and then being on the roof of my building, which is not going to give the exact address, but it's nearby enough that you can see the lawn. And we saw what appeared to be, and I've got videos of this, just peaceful supporters, folks who came out, families, middle-aged folks who came out waving the American flag, wanting to have a peaceful march, the same way that they had held two previous occasions already in November and December here in Washington.
Yeah, hang on. I just want to make sure. Hang on. I just want to make sure because I don't think you see the video we're putting up is where it looks like the crowd has actually gone and taken over where the inauguration is going to be held. That platform that's built on the west side of the, and I believe they had to get through barriers to get there. So I just want to make sure that it's disconnected with what you're explaining. Go ahead and explain, and we'll get to. We'll come back to the video.
Okay, so I'm ahead of that a little bit.
Yeah, go ahead.
So this is as it comes. I hear the first flashbang go off. And at first we thought, what was that, some kind of firework or something? And then another one went off. And I said, no, that definitely sounds like a flashbang. These are also known as stun grenades or concussion grenades, that they're crowd-controlled munitions. And I couldn't understand what it was for because when I'm looking at, I didn't see any violence from my vantage point. I'm towards the Senate side at this point. And then we hear they're storming the Capitol, they're storming the building, storming the barricades. And I'm in contact because at the same time, I've got a crew that's inside the building that's texting me and calling us and telling us what they're hearing on the inside. So we're trying to pass messages back and forth. At that point, you actually do see, and I believe you'll see this in the video, you saw members of the crowd who were trying to stop people from going inside. They were booing when the window was being smashed, the door was being smashed. They were saying, don't do this. And they were actually yelling the word Antifa at them. And they're saying that this isn't what we do. This isn't what we're about. We don't want to do this. We've got the video evidence of that. I also then started to see people who were agitating, people dressed in all black. I mentioned it this morning. Now we're hearing the New York Post has identified 2 members of New York Antifa. This is the New York Post reporting from law enforcement sources. We also have KUTV, which is out of Utah. It's a local news station, identifying a gentleman by the name of John Sullivan, who is an Antifa activist and the founder of an organization called Insurgents USA, who was actually there when the Air Force veteran was shot and killed. He was standing next to her in part of this situation. Now he's of course claiming, "Oh, I was just there to get some footage." Okay,
Yeah.
well, we're not so sure about that.
Okay, hang on.
You can go see his Twitter feed. So
hang on.
It was a fluid situation.
We'll take a short commercial break. We're going to come back and talk about the events that took place yesterday. Also, what's going on in Arizona. We dealt with Georgia this morning with Senator Liggum. We've got Mark Finchem to get us up to speed on what's happening in the courts out in Arizona. We'll be back in just a second.
And you are over, 'cause we're taking down the CCP.
Okay, so
Spread the word of the whole.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
This morning, President Trump explicitly called for demonstrations and protests to be peaceful. He was far more, you can moan and groan, but he was far more explicit about his calls for peace than some of the BLM and left-wing rioters were this summer when we saw violence sweep across this nation. Madam Speaker, it was wrong when people vandalized and defaced your home. It was wrong when thugs went to Senator Hawley's home. And I don't know if the reports are true, but the Washington Times has just reported some pretty compelling evidence from a facial recognition company showing that some of the people who breached the Capitol today were not Trump supporters. They were masquerading as Trump supporters and, in fact, were members of the violent terrorist group Antifa. Now, we should seek to build America up, not tear her down and destroy her. And I am sure glad that at least for one day, I didn't hear my Democrat colleagues calling to defund the police.
Okay, that is Matt Gaetz in a spirited defense there. I want to go back. We got Jack Posobiec, FogCityMidge, Mark Finchem, and Jack Maxey. I just want to go, okay, we're really pressed for time. We've got to get to some Arizona, and we've got some more clips that we want to play. We had actually another cold open for that section, but we didn't get to it. Posobiec, about this Antifa, I want to make sure that there were agitators, but in your mind, there clearly look like there's some guys that are not your typical MAGA guys in there, and I know there's going to be more evidence provided over the next couple of days, and they'll get to the bottom of it. It is Chuck Schumer, though, and Nancy Pelosi, who are coming forward and saying that the head of the law enforcement group over there, whether it's the Sergeant at Arms or the Capitol Police or all of this, ought to be terminated or they ought to be under new management. To your mind, from what you saw on the plaza, was there enough policing effort there to make sure that people could not access the building, right? Understanding that they people were saying, I think Bowser, the rumor the night before, they're expecting 10 million people, et cetera. And I realize our reputation had been, the reputation, Maggie, of all the marches in November, 1 million people show up and they're super polite and super nice and it's like almost like a festival. Do you think there was enough pre-planning of this?
No. Well, it seems.
Well, Steve, I'm a little confused about Mayor Bowser. Oh, okay. Because Mayor Bowser said that she was going to have the National Guard, there would be security, and yet when I got out there, you would see 3 or 4 guys on the side of the road standing around looking at their phones, and I get that, but there was not security around the U.S. Capitol other than, as you just said, those metal bike rack barricades, things that, you could walk right around them or you could lift them up. I mean, this was not a secure situation, and I think that at the pre-planning, if they knew that many people were going to be coming in, I'm not sure why exactly that it wasn't left open. Look, we know when there's big events in D.C., that agitators and outside groups love to infiltrate them and use that as cover for their activities. We saw this with Antifa and the BLM riots, something that I reported on for months during the summer of 2020, the most damaging riots in U.S. history, over $1 billion in damages. 30 people died. And yet, why they didn't learn that? You listen to Mayor Bowser today at her press conference. I watched the entire thing. She would act as if there'd never been violence in D.C. before, and she was shocked to imagine that such a thing could occur on her watch.
Maggie.
Yeah, to me, it seemed like the police who were around the Capitol were not really invested. Some of them were just standing by. And I have a video, actually, of just a line of police standing outside the Capitol. And in the distance, you can see people breaking into the side door on the northeast side of the Capitol. And it was sort of like, well, if this is really getting out of hand, then why are people just standing around in riot gear?
Do we have that? Does Denver have that video?
Yeah, I sent.
Okay, if Denver can play, if Denver can play that, Mark Finchem.
Well, my point is, and I don't want to correct Jack, but they did know. There was a scheduled speech after the president's speech at the Capitol. They did know. They didn't have the barriers
What do you mean?
in place.
What do you mean a scheduled speech? You mean another?
That's why
speaker.
people were
Yeah.
going there.
You
There
mean-
was so stop
they
the
had,
steal.
They had another platform over there for speakers,
Exactly.
yeah.
Stop the steal. So they can't hide behind, we didn't know. Of course they knew. That's why I found it very strange that you saw such a thin security package on the Supreme Court side of the building. No barriers were up. You had, I saw maybe 5 to 6 police officers up the very top where people had gone up the steps. I'm thinking, okay, that's not terribly unusual if they don't have a barrier to keep people off the steps.
You've been in law enforcement for what, 20 years?
21 years before I retired.
Before you retired. I had out there as far as being able to handle a crowd that they anticipated, rumor was 10 million or, hundreds of thousands. Was it the security package? Was it even a modicum of real security there?
I would say whoever planned that out was incompetent. They should be fired.
So you agree with Schumer and Nancy Pelosi?
Absolutely. Unless, of course, they directed that it only goes so far.
Well, I think we'll obviously find that out. But it's quite frankly, Schumer's not even in charge. It's Mitch McConnell and Nancy Pelosi. I mean, Nancy Pelosi. And of course, the buried lead today is the guy won't take her call. He's running around. Midge?
Well, I think I couldn't believe Bernie Kerick's video that he had on his Twitter that he played this morning, showing the D.C. police actually moving a barrier and allowing the entry of people.
Well, it was the Capitol Police, I believe, not D.C.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think it was. I'm not saying Bernie overstated. I think it was guys who looked around and said, "Hey, there are literally tens of thousands of people here. There's 4 of us. We're just going to move. We're going to open the barrier, and they're either going to come over it or we're not. So we're going to open the barrier." And then guys just went in, and they still went in pretty orderly, right?
I thought was the most telling thing was that Getz gives his colleagues on the other side of the aisle too much credit. He said, "I can't imagine nobody's talked about defunding the police." But instantaneously, and I saw the video everyone saw is horrifying and sad, instantaneously Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer's first response is to fire the sergeant at arms, fire the police. It's all their fault. Do we notice that? This is a pattern that we see over and over again. But it wasn't the police's fault when they set that church on fire across the street from the White House. But in this situation, we're going after who? And I have a lot of empathy for these police officers because they've been put in a tough situation. And why are they there? Because of our feckless elected officials who cannot seem to gain a consensus in this country that will make people happy.
It's a tough one. I think, Posobiec, what do you think? Did you see the police presence there that would have let people know, hey, this thing is sealed off, there's a big event going on, and if you want to protest out here, obviously you had speakers and a speaker's platform. If you want to protest, you want to yell and scream, you want to wave your flags, that's all fine. But this is a barrier you're not going to cross. There's no entrance here. This is it. And, you can yell at us like Antifa does or all these other guys do, the BLM, more radical guys at BLM, et cetera. But you're not going to cross. Did you see that? Because you were up there the longest of anybody.
Look, originally there was a barricade. It was that sort of metal fence, bike rack type barricade. That was removed at one point, but that was all the way down by the front lawn. People need to understand how big that lawn is. That's far away from the actual steps of the Capitol. And so I think initially people were trying to get on the lawn. All that entire part of D.C., Pennsylvania Avenue, was completely shut down between there and the Ellipse, as well as Constitution Avenue. So that's about a 15-minute walk from the Ellipse. So you've got people that have now come by, just understanding where the crowd is at this point, because it's so big. They don't even realize that it was barricaded at one point. They're just going onto the lawn because they're following everybody else who was going onto the lawn. And now we're seeing these videos from Bernie Kerick of certain officers that were waving people forward, letting people in. So you got to understand that even though that's one officer doing at one point, when you're dealing with crowd, these are basic crowd control tactics that were not followed. Basic crowd control tactics were not followed, right? One person sees someone do something, everyone else is going to follow. That's basic crowd analysis, human psychology 101, right? Why were those tactics not followed? Why was there not a plan in place for this?
Yeah, and I think Denver has my video clip ready that I took yesterday.
Yeah, can we play FogCityMidge's video?
Yeah, and we can talk over it. But
hey, go ahead, you talk.
So you can see that there's police right there, sort of at the corner, and then I zoom in, and you can see where people are entering the northeast side of the building. They're pushing up against the door. But when I pan over, you can see that there's a number of police and officers just sort of standing around, and you have to wonder, like, what's really going on? If this is like such an outrageous mob that's out of control, then why are there, over 10 officers just standing by?
The officers didn't see the guys on the other side of the building trying to get into the building?
I don't think they cared. Is what it looked like to me. I mean, there's an awareness of what was happening. The big crowd was on the side and watching.
And they do have these things called radios.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, we're being overrun here.
Wow.
The other thing I think is really important that we can't forget, this is arguably one of the most important days of the legislative calendar.
This is my point. No, it's one of the most historic, most important days.
Historic, you bet.
Right.
That's why I think the package. I agree with you about defending the police, but we're the law and order party.
No.
I just think the
understand,
planning of it. There's something not right. And, and I'm not a conspiracy theory guy. But there are no coincidences. I just can't figure out, and that's why I found it interesting that Pelosi and Schumer asked for these guys. I don't want to say heads on pikes to be fired, right?
And also curiously, the guy who pulled the trigger is a non-uniformed police officer, apparently with the Capitol Hill Police, but he still has not been identified. We don't know who this is, and compare this to the way that we have reacted to other police shootings that are part of the news.
One of the questions is going to be is the training for these guys, because you got to get down to are these guys trained? Are they prepared for this? Last question. I'll start with Posobiec very quickly. Did the reputation? They say the MAGA guys are always violent. Actually, the rallies and the protests here, the marches here, have been completely peaceful, right? I mean, at night, late at night, there's been some tangling up with certain elements of the MAGA movement with the guys in Antifa, but during the main events has been very peaceful, exception, particularly the huge ones. Did that reputation, Jack Posobiec, you think not prepare people, or was the reputation of the overall peacefulness of the MAGA movement in these protests, you think that left people unaware, the police not to have the right package out there?
I think that's entirely possible, but ultimately this comes down to Mayor Bowser. This comes down to the people who are supposed to keep it safe. That being said, look, we know CNN is never going to play those peaceful images. They're going to play the images of those agitators and those people that broke in, that went into the very front and did that. They're going to be playing that for 10 years. Probably every time they mention Donald Trump, they're going to be talking about that. They're going to try to use that to smear the entire populist movement, to try to shut this down for years to come. And they've already done. The social media companies have done it. We've seen Chase Bank came out, Jamie Dimon. We've seen Chevron come out. The entire establishment is trying to use this to shut down the populist movement.
Maggie, your belief. You've been at these things from day one.
Yeah, I've never seen any violence or any issues at any kind of Trump event. In fact, we're the party that's just peaceful. We clean up after ourselves. We don't even leave garbage in our aftermath. But I just find this entire thing so completely disingenuous, because we've seen nothing but, destruction from the left in so many of these events over the past few years. I mean, even in 2017, we had the destruction of cars, like at the inauguration, right?
Yeah.
So,
okay, let's get Posobiec. What's your Twitter handle? We're going to let you go. Jack Posobiec, One American News. How do people follow you during the day or night?
It's at Jack Posobiec, JCKPOSOBIEC.
And you're doing more reporting. We have about 15 seconds. You're doing more reporting and investigation on the Antifa element of this?
We're going to be digging in as far as it goes.
Jack Posobiec, One American News. Okay, we're going to take a short commercial break. We're going to come back and we're talk to Mark Finchem about actually technically what's going on in the courts out in Arizona. We're going to play a few clips from last night from the debate in Arizona, and then we're going to come back and hear from Finchem himself exactly where this stands. And is it just a big waste of time, or is it still meaningful? We'll return in a moment on War Room Pandemic.
We're taking down the CCP. Spread the word all through Hong Kong. We will fight till they're all gone. We rejoice when there's no more. Let's take down the CCP. They have all lied for too long. We will end what they do wrong.
Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Okay, welcome back. Before we go to Arizona, real quickly, Maggie, anything else, and then Finchem, anything else you want to get in about yesterday? I know we're going to have more tomorrow, and there's going to be more Antifa things are coming up, and more about the 14-year. Is it Babbitt, Ashley Babbitt?
Yes.
The 14-year Air Force veteran. We'll have more about that. Anything else we should cover right now?
I just have to go on the record and say that it was very difficult to get a hold of everything that was happening because there was a lot of chaos. There were a lot of people around the Capitol. But as I'm watching videos come out from different angles and different perspectives, I'm definitely very skeptical about maybe some coordinated efforts of different people who were there, maybe agitators, Antifa, possibly even people dressed as police, or at least some people that are ushering people in that look like they're supposed to be there and in charge, opening up gates. And I'm seeing it from different angles. At different points. So
you mean people that would be posing as police?
I don't know. Okay. I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist here. All I'm saying is when you see images of people dressed as officers that are waving people in.
You don't think? Okay, well, I want to see that when you say waving people in. I think it may be there's so many guys that are saying, "Hey, we're not going to stand up here." You've been an officer for. We'll get in more to tomorrow. Finchem, you've been a police officer 21 years. Your assessment overall before we return to Arizona?
My assessment is that the security package that they had for one of the most important days of the calendar was grossly inadequate, and whoever planned that out was incompetent.
Okay, can we play? I want to play just the Arizona package. I think it's Mike Johnson and is it Jordan? Whoever the Arizona package asked for, the short one. Can we play it right now?
This year, it's the primary reason. It's one of the reasons why the election of 2020 became riddled with an unprecedented number of serious allegations of fraud and irregularities all over the country. National polls, as has been said, indicate that a huge percentage of Americans now have serious doubts about not just the outcome of this presidential contest, but also the future reliability of our election system itself. Since we are convinced that the election laws in Arizona and some other key states were changed in this unconstitutional manner, we have a responsibility today. The slates of electors produced under those modified laws are thus unconstitutional. They are, quote, not regularly given or lawfully certified as required by the Electoral Count Act, and they're invalid on their face. That's just the conclusion that you have to reach. Given these inescapable facts, we believe we have no choice today but to vote to sustain objections to those slates of electors.
Okay, so we're not going to get Jim Jordan. Okay, but I got one. Not bad. Not bad for the War Room. Betting 50% on a cold open or a mid open, right? Okay. I want to go to Arizona. What is happening? You've been key to get this letter that was sent. You've also been key of the letter that 160 people sent. Where to Maricopa County? Where in the legal process or the legislative process, we got about 4 minutes left, does it stand, and is this a waste of time, or is this still relevant to 2020?
Yeah, Steve, so I want to start with the whole notion of false hope that Romney was speaking of. That was not given by President Trump.
That was actually Tom Cotton.
All right, Tom Cotton. That wasn't given by
Called
President
you guys
Trump.
Insurrectionist.
That was given by the process of the joint session. There was an opportunity to object. That's what gave people hope. Now, where we're at with the Arizona Senate subpoenas, the Board of Supervisors in Maricopa County had until Friday, tomorrow, to respond to their failure to comply. On Monday next week, we swear in a new legislature. The new legislature, the new Senate, is already committed to moving forward. They are not going to have their plenary authority challenged by a political subdivision and refusing to provide access not only to the ballot images but also to the voting machines. Now, you've asked the question.
This was the group that sent out the subpoena and it basically got shined on.
Basically, we're gonna bind this up in court. So we got a court date of the 13th. So the timing of this is very important. We sign in a new legislature on the 11th. The same president, only a different judiciary chair is going to be there, and they are already committed to, if we need to reissue the subpoenas, we will. And by the way, this is not going away. We are going to do this. Now, will it have an effect for this election? That's debatable. It is absolutely necessary for Arizona, especially Maricopa County, because it's 3/5 of the vote in the state, to fully understand what happened and to vet this. If this was, in fact, a manipulation of votes, we've got to know it for the 22 election. If it wasn't, we now restore confidence in the voters, because that right now is the major question, at least affecting Maricopa County voters.
What about if you find there was manipulation of the vote or somehow it wasn't right? I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but what happens if you find something not right about the certification we just had of your electors?
Well, then we got a new mess. And frankly, I constitutionally, I don't know where that's at. So if we are able to say, hey, we now have found the incontrovertible crime scene, smoking gun, dead body, all of the evidence, whether we now go as a body and say, this is serious enough for us to, again, attempt to reclaim our franchise as a legislature, I don't know where we're at with that. But I do know that Georgia wants to do something similar.
What Georgia's talking about, right. we're pressed for time. I just want to answer before we lose you, is that the Atlanta Journal-Constitution had a reporter going on for the runoff, going through Georgia, and they made a statement, Axios picked up, that said they had not talked to one Republican in the state so far that didn't think there was either fraud, stealing, illegitimate, illegal. If I was to go to Arizona and do the same thing of Republican voters, people that voted for Donald Trump, and AJC said Georgia was 100%. What percentage do you believe it would be in Arizona?
We've got to be in the high 90s.
High 90s. High 90s.
Got to be.
People think it was illegal, illegitimate, and fraudulent?
The Donald Trump voters do not believe that this is a legitimate election.
Okay, how do people get you on social media?
Well, they if I'm out of Twitter jail, they can go to at Mark Finchem. That's MarkFinchem. Same thing on Parler. Not sure where I'm going to be at on Facebook. Okay. I've probably been banned there too.
But you're saying the process continues next week. So
the process continues next week, and the Senate is not going to allow this to go undone.
Okay, still got a mess. Okay, by the way, get the Real America's Voice app. You want to watch us all day long. Go to text War Room. That's one word. War Room 2-888-111. Is that our lucky number, John?
888-111.
888-111. Text War Room 2-888-111 for the app. Okay, we're going to see you tomorrow morning at 10. More breaking news at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. War Room Pandemic.